Welcome to the Straight Talk on Fleet podcast with Erin Gilchrist. Each week, Erin will be breaking down fleet management, trying to cut through the noise and get down to the real issues safety and operations leaders are struggling with every day. The goal will be to get to the bottom of how leaders can break down these silos of information and accelerate change management, how to use real-time, accurate data to drive massive efficiencies across fleet-focused business processes, and to elevate people's careers with emerging best practices. Now it's time for the Straight Talk on Fleet.
Welcome, Fleet community. I'm super excited to be back for, I think this is our 57th episode of the Straight Talk on Fleet, which is so cool. Imagine just in under 2 years, we've hit this many episodes. And I think we've done that because we have this great community of fleet and safety and ops managers out there who are listening and commenting. We have great guests like we're going to have today. But if you don't know me, I'm Erin Gilchrist. I'm VP of Fleet Evangelism at IntelliShift. So fun title, but it just means that I get to do this, and I get to do it because I'm a longtime fleet manager with a huge passion for safety and efficiency and certainly sustainability. So I like bringing my experience here and really generating some great conversation and community to help elevate the careers of our colleagues out there in fleet and in safety. So today I'm super excited. I can have Thurman with me today. Welcome, Thurman. So great to have you here.
How are you? Thank you, Erin. It's a pleasure to chat with you today.
So Thurman's been in the industry a long time. So we're just going to say a little over 30 years. And he is currently serving as the senior manager of fleet for Ferguson Enterprises. So I want to make sure I get this right. Ferguson does a lot of things, and they're a big organization. So Ferguson is the largest value-added distributor serving the specialized professional in their $340 billion residential and non-residential North American construction market. So huge organization. They help make their customers' complex projects simple, successful, and sustainable by providing expertise in a wide range of products and services from plumbing, HVAC, lighting, appliances, water, wastewater solutions, and much more. So you can imagine running a fleet for Ferguson must mean that you're busy. Things are not ever changing. Every day is different. All the fun things that fleet managers get to do every day. So we're really excited to hear about that. So again, thank you, Thurman, for joining us, and introduce yourself. Talk about your role, and just explain, unpack your fleet for us, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So I lead the enterprise level fleet strategy for all of Ferguson Enterprises, and that's anywhere that we have what I would consider dirt equity. So what kind of falls or rolls up to what I lead is your traditional fleet pieces, all of our assets from an equipment or material handling perspective, as well as driver compliance, driver safety, sustainability, etc. Our fleet greater than 5,500, Class 1 to Class 8 across all 50 states, more than 2,000 locations in the U.S. So at the heart of my initiatives really was to bring a decentralized fleet model or fleet landscape and drive the creation and implementation of a centralized fleet operation for Ferguson, whereby we leverage the subject matter expertise of the fleet team and create efficiencies and cost-saving opportunities while continuing to deliver the tools that our operations folks need to meet the needs of the customers, from planning, procurement, maintenance management, sustainability, fuel management, life cycle planning, and ultimately remarketing of those assets. So we manage the entire life cycle of all the assets in the fleet.
Cradle to grave.
Yeah, cradle to grave, and heavy focus on the safety aspect, efficiency, and sustainability. So that's kind of that's what I do every day.
That sounds exciting, challenging, complex, but it was interesting. Thurman, I just did an interview with another fleet leader, Ernie Garcia of Gothic Landscape, and they run a decentralized model. And so I'm excited for our listeners to hear Ernie talk about that, and you talk about how you've gone from decentralized, because it is a challenge. And it's about, gaining buy-in from from everybody. I think top down, bottom up is what you like to say about the way that you lead your fleet. So thanks for that awesome description. Okay, so you said class 1 to class 8, a little bit of everything. Does everything get upfitting? Talk about that for a second, just so we can break down your fleet a little bit more.
It absolutely does. And from the fleet perspective, from an old fleet guy, we do have a typically what I would consider a vanilla fleet. So our spec catalog is not too detailed, it's not too in depth. Some of our smaller vehicles get a smaller upfit package, whether that's a pipe rack and a lift gate. Sometimes we do toolboxes on some of our smaller pickup trucks and even smaller flatbeds. And then as we get into that medium and heavy duty segment, that's really where the specs kind of take off. So we have a number of flatbed and stake side trucks. We have curtain sides. We have box trucks, your traditional dry van delivery. And then we have crane trucks and some other specialty vehicles scattered throughout the fleet where the business needs dictate that we need that type of upfit. On our van or final mile delivery segment, we have several different interior van upfits. So think about our different business verticals. The HVAC will have a typical different upfit from your plumbing and your shelving for your typical just final mile box delivery. So from an upfit perspective, everything we touch we modify in some way. And depending on what business vertical it's in is how complex that upfit could
Yeah,
become.
I think that's such a fun part of the job is specing vehicles. Some might disagree, but I always loved doing that. I loved just, looking at the advances that were coming along and sometimes being a part of having a voice in some of that. And I'm sure, you've served on boards as well, which really helps drive some of those processes and some of the choices that we have as fleet leaders to enhance our vehicles either from an efficiency or safety point or hopefully both. So when we talked before, we always gear up for podcasts and kind of chat before we record. And I found it interesting. Not only is Thurman managing this large fleet, but they are growing all the time. So thinking about fleet growth and the strategy around that, acquisitions are tough, right? You're bringing in assets that were managed by someone else, maybe not the way you've managed them. But with your fierce sort of acquisition model right now, talk about some of the processes around integrating those old, new, in between assets into your fleet and just talk about how that works cohesively. Maybe what has worked and what hasn't worked. So, some of our audience members who are going through that right now, which are many, can gain some insights.
Absolutely. And I would say this applies to all fleets, not just Ferguson, but if you think of the fleet ecosystem as being a snowstorm and then the fleet industry itself being a snowman, every fleet is a snowflake, meaning we're all similar, but
I
we're all
love that.
different. So
I'm going to
as
use
we
that.
as we as we acquire companies, depending on where they are in their fleet journey, depends on what type of snowflake they are. So for us, it's really kind of molding them into our processes and how we run our fleet model. A lot of that is through process and planning. So we have an onboarding strategy, we have an acquisition strategy. I have a fleet acquisition liaison. So when we're brought in and we understand that we're going to acquire a company, we do our due diligence, we look at the assets, we do a vehicle condition report. We understand where that acquisition may be in their safety journey is not the same place that we are in our safety journey. So step one is to really increase, if needed, the safety aspects of the equipment that they may have. In some cases, that means on day one that we refresh their equipment a little
Right.
bit.
Which has been
In
challenging,
other
right?
cases,
In
yeah,
recent years.
absolutely,
Oh, I want to hear more about that, but carry
absolutely.
on.
Yeah, so think about fuel cards, think about driver qualification files, how driver safety standards, how we measure those, our telematics program, our camera program. So a lot of this could be completely foreign to so some smaller fleets, some smaller acquisitions. They just, they weren't on that same journey. And then day one, all of a sudden, Ferguson comes in, and we may or may not rebrand depending on the type of acquisition. But someone shows up and it's like, hey, we're going to put telematics on all your vehicles. We're going to put a camera in the windshield. Here's a new set of rules to play by. And by the way, we're going to give you a whole new fleet of trucks because yours is a little too old, or maybe the cost per mile is a little too high. So in some cases, that's great. In others, it's not. So we really, in order to be a successful fleet manager, you really need to be a change champion,
I
right? So you have to be
100%
engaged in
agree.
change.
Yeah.
So you have to understand how to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk, but at the acquisition level. So understanding there's a lot of things that just logistically can't happen overnight, but what can, what are the easy wins? And then really it's just developing a plan on getting from point A to point B. And once you explain that, have conversations with the drivers, have conversations with warehouse managers, have conversations with branch managers of those acquisitions to give them that point of contact, because in the absence of having a liaison that they could ask questions to, that's where the challenges come in, because they're gonna make it up. If they don't know what to do, they're gonna do something,
and maybe just something they've
what you
always
want them
done,
to do.
right? That doesn't
Correct.
coincide with your strategies. While I'm sure that process, you've done it over time, it's repeatable, it's sustainable, it's scalable, in terms of how you integrate, new businesses into your own. I think one big challenge that I hear about from a lot of fleet leaders who are going through this is, the people aspect, right? That driver adoption. So a lot of smaller fleets, of course, they don't have safety technology. Maybe they don't even have telematics, and you're coming in and you're being a change agent. But to do that, change management is hard. I did a whole podcast on just that. But, I just talked about what it meant to me. But talk about, this idea of getting drivers on board and driver adoptions, especially as it relates to acquisitions. It's always tough.
Yeah, it is, and I think the first part of that is, you want to dispel that myth that it's a gotcha system. So we generally, during that onboarding process, when we discuss, especially if it's an acquisition that does not have a telematics program or some type of driver metrics or driver behavior program, it's really a driver exoneration program, and that's what we focus on. We focus on the positives, and we say, here's where, in the past, vehicles that are involved in an accident and it's a commercial vehicle, immediately the general public thinks you're at fault and have really deep pockets, and it's always the driver's
Oh,
fault.
yeah.
We can dispel that, and we can say that it is not, that you did everything correct, that you were having the best driving day of your life, and circumstances outside of your control contributed to an accident. So we go in with a lot of those positive stories, a lot of feedback from our own drivers on how the program has made them a better driver, not only at work but at home. How our safety programs have, from a driver perspective, have really impacted communities in a positive way. And then we also kind of throw out the carrot at the end of the
Love
day
that.
and say, we're now enrolling you in a driver safety bonus program, where if you follow the rules and you're a good driver, we're going to reward you with cash, and we help you get there, right? So it's kind of a stepped approach. We've recently revamped our entire driver safety award
Nice.
program
Tell us a
to
little
be
bit about
more
that.
inclusive.
I love hearing about incentive programs because I'm like you, always about
Yeah,
the carrot. The stick doesn't work. And, so I love how you're doing a combination of really this communication, storytelling, focusing on the positives, showing them what's in it for them, and then saying, okay, and on top of that, not only is this, we know this is a big change for you, but right away we can enroll you and reward you for this behavior. Probably helps to overcome some of the naysayers or, drivers that think that it's all about Big Brother versus, hey, this vehicle is a dangerous tool and the roadways are a dangerous place. So we really just want to keep you safe. So sometimes the stories and messaging aren't enough, but I love the incentive programs too. And our customers are always asking, okay, how do we do this well? So I love the stories about how different fleets are handling it. There's so many different ways to go about it. So talk about this revamp. What's it look like?
So historically, we had done a yearly driver program where, you drive for an entire year. You're graded, every month throughout the year. You have a specific driver metric or a driver score. There's very particular behavior patterns, and there are certain things that would disqualify you from the program. If you think about that, if you're in the first month of that year-long process and something happens and you hit that trigger where you're disqualified, there's zero incentive to drive safe for the remaining
Exactly. That's
11
so
months.
hard. So
Uh,
hard.
so so what we've done is we've actually made it a quarterly program, and we increased the program so that if you qualify, so we pay out every quarter, and if you receive that bonus in every quarter, there's an additional kicker at the end of the year. So we actually increased the amount of the bonus program. That way, if you have a bad month or if you have a bad day driving and something happens, it doesn't disqualify you for the entire
That
year.
makes a lot of
So
sense.
our drivers love the program. From a revamp perspective, from an acquisition perspective, when we lay out the targets, there's also a challenge system so that if something happens and your driver score drops below our threshold, drivers can challenge what happened. We provide a tool for them to do that, a mechanism for them to do that. And that comes back to our fleet safety team for review. And we look at those, and we have individuals assigned to look at just those challenges that come in and then sit down either at the driver level or at the driver manager level and explain, what, you're exactly right. We believe that this is in error, so we can correct that and change it and kind of wipe those points off the board, if you will.
Amazing.
Con- Conversely, if the challenge comes in and we need to uphold it, we can at least explain why, and then how do we correct that, and how do we put a plan in place so that it doesn't happen again. And I think drivers are very receptive to that. So it's they don't feel like it's just a automatic big brother system that lives out there in the internet somewhere that's just assigning them points. There are instances, take hard braking, for example.
Yeah.
There are instances where I want to see a hard braking event because it prevented an accident, right? In those cases, we have a mechanism for the drivers, they can self-record the incident. So we have a button on our cameras. They can push the button, it'll capture that. And when we look at it, we're like, you know what? We're not going to hold that against you, because if you had not hit the brakes as hard as you did, it would have led to a much greater incident. So those are kind of the challenges that we look
Again,
at.
it really comes down to like tools and technology. And I always say this on every podcast, tools and technology that make it easy for the drivers to not just comply, but to communicate. Just like they're not there, just like driving and getting points and looking at their scorecard, but they can actually interact on a bunch of different levels. One, they can challenge things, which I love, and I think when you said that, even if they're wrong, that's just a great opportunity to talk through how the technology works, what you saw versus what they thought they did. And then right there, you can have that coaching time.
Correct.
Right?
We do real-time coaching. So it happens in real time, same day. In some cases, real time, as in it will provide feedback as to
Right.
this is what happened, this is what you did wrong. The other piece to the program that we do is to really engage uh, the community at large, but the behavior is we send information to the home address of the driver. So if they qualify for the bonus program in that quarter, we send that notice as a
Oh,
thank you
that's
letter,
great.
home, so that the family can read that. And we've gotten multitudes of feedback from our drivers and driver families where the behavior has now carried over into their personal life, and they're actually driving their personal vehicles in a much more safe manner. They've started to kind of teach other family members how they should be driving, and following distance, hard cornering, hard braking, harsh acceleration, the whole gambit of driver behavior.
And just think if they have kids that are starting, getting their temps and they have to get their driving hours in, and the way that the parent is now coaching, literally coaching
Correct.
the child, I think it creates a positive interaction between parent and child. We see that a lot with our customer base come back and telling us, yeah, this has made me drive better all around. Now my wife's driving better. I feel more equipped to train my upcoming, you know, family members who are going to be drivers. So it's great. I mean, I love the breadth and depth of it. And I love the quarterly versus the annually because, I think in this world, instant gratification is popular. And also, it's just a year seems like a long time to wait. So having that, and it's a reinforcement, sort of mechanism as well as a reward. It's just reminding them that, hey, in 12 weeks, it was really one day at a time when you're a driver, but especially the way the roadways are today, it's one day at a time, but really to have that to look forward to every quarter it's fantastic. It's a great model.
So instant gratification, right? I use that term frequently. And if you think about how fleet has changed and how the fleet manager job has changed throughout the little exercise we call COVID, our customers changed. So our customer went from, placing an order to receiving that order timely to placing that order and expecting instant gratification because they could get that through any app on your phone, whether it was a pizza or tires. It was that instant gratification. So we had to adapt and change our business model to meet that instant gratification. So what that meant from a fleet perspective was the tools that we had yesterday no longer applied today. We couldn't meet that demand. So it was a very quick shift for us to kind of redesign and build new tools to allow for our operations teams and our sales teams to meet that customer
Love
demand of instant gratification. So I always tell, especially young fleet managers, I said, if you want to be successful, work backwards from your customer. And your customer is both internal and external. So look at your external customers. What are they requiring of your company? Now develop the tools that your internal customers can use to meet that customer demand.
That's great.
But don't rest on your laurels because your external customer is going to change.
Exactly. And I think what's great about that is I think all of us think about engagement differently, but engagement's really to me is okay, I'm in my role. I know how my role plays into the overall success of the company. And when companies are structured with good engagement, then, you know, their employees do better work. Happy people do better work. And people don't leave jobs because they don't get paid enough. They leave because they don't feel a part of anything. So I love the fact that, you're looking at your ultimate customer needs. How do you adapt, going backwards? It's so rewarding to be able to not just run a successful fleet, but to constantly contribute to the overall success of your companies. And I often say that so many companies look at their fleet as just a cost center, and we are profit generators. And you just explained how a new fleet manager can look at themselves as a profit generator by working from the customer need back and on a constant cycle because it's always changing. That's great advice. On that note, I think about, long-term strategy. So you're doing a lot of great things, which we're not done talking about. But when I think of, the fact that we started on this acquisition sort of process and growth, growth is fun, but it's hard for fleet managers. Talk about your long-term vision for your fleet and then how you're positioning to adapt to your vision and then future trends that you see in the industry and with your customer base, to your last point.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the long-term vision for fleet, when I first came to work for Ferguson, I kind of laid out that 3, 5, 7-year plan. There was a little bit of an industry disruption in there that accelerated part of that plan and it extended
Just a
another
little
part.
disruption,
Uh,
huh?
some of which we still live through
Mhm.
today, but we'll get there. So the long term vision is really, when I say move to a centralized model, we're not complete yet. So we've still got many steps to go to truly centralize all activity of the fleet, and that doesn't happen overnight. When we talk about change management, that's a culture change inside of an organization, and those take not months or weeks, but years to really
Yeah, because you're
to do
taking
well
away
and
some
do
of that
to do
freedom
correctly.
that the decentralized model provided to the
Correct.
operations. And so, but if you're replacing that freedom with freedom, meaning, great technology and tools that make it easy, that equate equate to profitability for your operations leaders, they're like, okay, let me jump on board. So it is hard, but when you do it right, wow, can it be rewarding for everybody? So yeah, dig into some of
Absolutely.
these
And
strategies.
you have to lead with the data, right? So you have to lead with the
Yep.
science. You have to prove that this is why this makes sense. And your operations, your old, decentralized model is going to be more profitable because by allowing us to kind of manage some pieces for you, it frees up not only time, but it adds value back to the organization. And I can actually add dollars back to the bottom line of a single branch unit through a well-run fleet operation. So it's having all that in front of you, and immediately you'll hear, well, this is the way I've done it for 30 years, and I've been successful. So why should I change? And then the next step is kind of what I call the denial phase, where they're going to dispute the data. All the data is going to be
Mhm.
wrong. Um, and as a fleet manager, you just have to smile and nod and understand that those are the challenges that come with the territory. It comes with the role. So you have to be prepared to kind of explain. Here's the science behind why we're doing this. Here's what's in it for you. This is how we both become more successful, and this is how we build a stronger company overall. And to your point, a number of acquisitions, especially smaller acquisitions that on board, have been in that mentality of fleet as a cost of doing business. It's a tool to get from point A to point B, and then when we really sit down and explain, this is a competitive advantage, right? We can
100%.
turn our fleet into a competitive advantage and a revenue generator, and this is how we do that. That's when the light bulbs start going off, and you really start making
So
some
that
inroads.
change management model is really that's one part of your long-term strategy is to continue to perfect and hone in on this centralized model and the benefits of it. Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you guys are thinking about the future of fleet management?
So the challenge in the industry becomes regulatory. That's the most immediate
Yeah.
challenge. What regulations do we face tomorrow that we didn't face today? How do we get in front of that? How do we, continuously evolve our fleet to be compliant? And then it's staying on the forefront of technology. We talk a lot about artificial intelligence today and AI models and what can AI do for fleet. I like to kind of extrapolate that out to say, what can AI do for me? What can it do for my team
Right.
members? I don't know that I need an AI model to build a PM compliance program. I do need an AI model today to tell me what my PM compliance is so that I don't have to go look it up, because then that saves
Right.
me time. So I think there's an evolution in even that piece. We're barely scratching the surface of the capabilities
It's
of where we can
exciting.
go with that technology.
Very exciting.
It is, and getting in on the leading edge of some of that to kind of guide where that goes in the industry is fun
Yeah.
as well. Um, Fleet managers have a vernacular that's different from the rest of the world. So when you have IT folks and engineers build these AI models, we don't speak the
Right.
same
Right.
language, right? So it needs a decoder ring to try to figure out what the fleet folks talk about. Um, so some of that has been fun to work through, and I'm working with a number of partners now to kind of build some of those tools. And where can we best apply
Hmm.
it? Where can what's the fastest way for me to mine data? Is it through a data scientist and a business analyst, or is it through an AI model that can just go get that information for me and push it into a dashboard, show it to me. And it's not just me, it's members of my team. And then if we push that downstream, it's other business leaders in the organization, all the way down to drivers. How can the AI technology help our drivers? So I think that's one way that the industry is evolving. I think you will see, we talk a lot about sustainability and electrification currently, but I think there's a multitude of alternative fuels or alternative energy sources that are coming down the pike, and to truly be in tune with your own fleet of where those technologies fit, because you have to remember, much like us getting back to the snowflake, each fleet is a little bit different. What works well for one may not work well for another. So where you have the opportunity to test and pilot some of these technologies, I would say take those opportunities, and understand they may fail, and they may fail miserably, but at least then you have a baseline, and it's, what's the root cause of the failure? Let's get back, let's redesign, let's help move the industry forward, kind of as fleet professionals. So that's another exciting part of
it's
the
so
boring fleet management
so
world.
exciting. When I hear you talking about kind of, your longer term strategy, it's what I'm taking from it. At least one thing is there's no silver bullet. And I always talk about that when I'm helping someone build a sustainability plan. They're like, well, we got to go electric. And I'm like, actually, you got to get driver behavior under wraps, because that drives the efficiency of your asset, and your MPG can go like this, and your fuel, consumption can go like this. Idling and lightweighting and recycling components of the many upfits you do. I mean, there's just so many ways to go about it. And then there's alt fuel technologies, alt fuels, EVs, hybrids, so I think, really looking at safety and sustainability more holistically, drives down costs, drives up efficiency, and again, helps these fleet managers to, become that hero in their organization, and not just kind of the person that spends, 80 to $100 million a year on operating costs, right? Just like helping look at the organizations to look at fleet leaders a little bit differently. You talked about data, my favorite thing. Many years ago, I was running a fleet and implemented telematics, and it was not a popular thing. I mean, it became really popular because we saved a ton of money, and I know we saved lives, and we did a lot of great things. But the data, it was so exciting to be able to find all the different ways in which we could leverage that data across the organization, not just in fleet. So talk about, your data. I know you're a data-driven person, data-driven department, data-driven company. Talk about how that applies to what you're doing in fleet, how you're leveraging it, what it means, and maybe some KPIs. Like, how do you know you're successful? Talk about the ways in which you're measuring yourself, your team, your vehicles, et cetera.
Sure. So I have maybe the anomaly, but I'm not data averse, meaning I want it all, right? So if it's available, I want it. And part of that is because if I have the data and we've been collecting it, getting back to the data mining, it's easier to go back and capture whatever the answer is that I'm trying to solve for. So I think one of the unique pieces to fleet management as a whole is the questions that come up today and tomorrow, you didn't know were going to exist yesterday, right? So that constant evolution. So if you have the data already stored in, a data lake, Azure, whatever you want to use, it's easier to go back and capture that. You can go back, and do a run rate. You can go back and look at 24 months worth of information, instead of saying, well, you know what, I really wish I could answer that question, but we haven't been capturing that data set. So now let's start capturing the data set, and I'll get you an answer in a year. That by the time that year rolls around, we're in a new model year for vehicles. That question's no longer going to apply in a lot of cases. So for us, from a data perspective, I say turn on the fire hose. Give me every sensor data, every piece of information that we can absolutely get our hands on. And then we will mine it in real time for whatever question that we need to answer.
Again, AI is going to just help to accelerate that
Exactly.
and bubble up those
Exactly.
trends and insights that you need right now to make decisions. And they'll be data driven. It's just it's genius and it's fun. Of
Yeah, at some point in time, then we start talking predictive and prescriptive,
course.
and we're dabbling in a lot of that. I shouldn't say dabbling because we have some of that that's
Well, I'm
pretty
guessing
solid.
like in your maintenance program, you've been looking at, all the different assets that you've acquired over the years and how they've performed year over year with different engines and driver behaviors and makes and models and whatnot to figure out, hey, what's working for us and what's not. Are we maybe overloading these vehicles, or why are some not performing as well as others? So you've probably been doing that for quite some time, in addition to some of the other things you'll share.
You're exactly right, and that's part of our secret sauce. I call that the Heinz 57 kind of
I remember you
the
saying
behind
that.
the
I
scenes
love that.
piece.
There's some
Uh,
there's
so
some Thurmanisms I'm
that's
stealing, by the way, from this
yeah.
conversation.
So there's some stuff that lives in the background that keeps us kind of as a from a fleet perspective on that competitive edge, if you will, gives us an advantage. Getting back to KPIs, so a lot of things that we measure and cadence varies, but we look at PM currency, scheduled versus unscheduled downtime. We look at utilization of assets. So the other piece to a well-run kind of centralized fleet model is to look at the utilization across business units, because in a decentralized model, you've got, if it was 2,000 locations, you've got 2,000 fleet managers. 1,999 of them are going to do it a different way. Um, and they're really only worried about their little fiefdom, right? So it's what's most important at that location. And then if you roll that up into a business group, they're not sharing assets across business groups. They're not sharing resources. So when you centralize that, we kind of wipe that slate clean. And for me, I look at the entire ecosystem for a fleet, and if we have an underutilized truck here and we have a need here, we're going to move that asset. And in a decentralized model, that creates a lot of tension. There needs to be a lot of collaboration. There needs to be a lot of alignment. In a centralized model, that's a very easy conversation.
Yeah.
If it doesn't meet our utilization metric, I become the repo guy. I'm not very well liked, but I become the repo guy, and I move that asset where it needs to go. Because if the wheels aren't turning, it's costing us money. So the only way we make money with assets is if the
Of
wheels are
course, they
turning.
have to be productive all the time.
Utilization as a metric, we look at kind of life cycle, where assets are in a life cycle. So we call it a VRS, or vehicle replacement strategy. So that's one of
You
our
have a
KPIs
pretty
that we
aggressive VRS from what I remember, correct?
we do, and it's and another tip to young fleet managers: a lot of retention programs are built around years or miles. That's one way to do it. I don't want to say that's the best way to
I
do it,
agree.
but that is one way to do it. So if you look at hands-on, look at each one of your vehicles at the VIN level and develop a metric. So miles and age do play into that, but how are they weighted, right? So let's look at miles per gallon. Let's look at maintenance costs. Let's look at insurance, license and registration, taxes. So look at all of those different pieces. Utilization should be a score, and then weight those and develop, your own kind of replacement score. In my world, and this is old school from where I came from, you may have a truck that's 2 years old, and it's just what we call a hanger queen. It stays in the shop all the time, and it's just nickel and diming you to death. That one would come up for replacement much sooner than maybe an older truck that's high mileage, but it's getting the job done day in and day out, and it doesn't, the cost per mile or the total cost of ownership or total cost of operation is very low.
Right.
So, that's another metric that you need to look at to kind of gauge your fleet. So those are all kind of in our KPI deck, if you
Love it.
will, kind of in our KPI set. Um, there's a few other things that we look at, from incidents, breakdowns per million miles or per 1,000 miles, whatever the metric is that we're looking at. So I would say scheduled downtime is what you want. Unscheduled downtime is a
Oh,
killer, right?
wow.
That's where it really
Well, and
costs you.
that's where this big data and the analytics come into play is, you know, if you think about if the technician kid or driver can get up in the morning and, okay, am I fit today for the job? Is my vehicle fit? So how do I know I've done an inspection? The data from that digital inspection flows into the maintenance. And this starts this whole um, data sharing process that then allows you at your level and your team to take all that data and say, okay, this vehicle can go out for the day, um, but it may need some sort of service in the next few hours, the next day. You can make those quick decisions to make sure that you can get to the customers on time. That breakdowns are not unplanned, that you know something's going to happen. You can get it into a shop. And this whole idea of being able to get the parts that you want put on your vehicles um, by the types of technicians with the right skills at maybe locations where you have partnerships. Okay, for fleet managers out there like, oh, I could never make that happen. You can. The data is what helps you, drive something that you can actually plan and predict and not get upsold every step of the way, or feeling like things are rogue when you're using that data right. So I love the fact that you're, you know, give it all to me and it will come in handy. Even if it's not data points that you're using today, gathering it will help you kind of start to predict the future, which I think is possible with the types of tools and technologies that we have today and all the great data that's coming from phones and onboard devices and vehicles themselves. And I love it. It makes me so
Yeah,
excited.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even so, you talk about vendors and data. I think let's double click on that one for a
Yeah,
quick second. You can start scorecarding,
there you
right?
go.
And guilty as charged, but you can start scorecarding your maintenance vendors and where you go for maintenance or where you go for repairs, or if it's an accident repair for a body shop, you can start scorecarding those solutions providers, if you will. Where do you get the best service? Where do you get the fastest turn time? Where is it the most value add, the most cost efficient? So then you start driving business. Now you have economy of scale, and you can leverage economy of scale for even better rates. So it's data's the new, it's the new oil, it's the new gold, right? So he who has the data wins is really how I
Yeah,
look at it.
and
So
who stewards
yeah,
it well, right? So I
correct.
love there's so many different ways to slice and dice and say, how am I successful? What KPI should I be looking at? And there's some really, obvious ones and not so obvious ones, and really, what's going to resound with your operations managers so you can get them to come on board and understand that if they reduce their fleet cost per whatever they're doing, fleet cost per delivery, fleet cost per customer served, that they start to, that light bulb starts to go off as like, hey, wait, if I do these fleet things well, I'm more profitable. So, I think the more the KPIs and the more operationalized they are, the more buy-in you get, which is super fun. And how do you do that? And I think one topic I want to touch on is just this. You shared you use a top-down, bottom-up approach. So you can have data, you can have KPIs, but if you don't have the right approach to change management, communication, incentives, whatever. So, talk about how you balance that top down, bottom up approach to leverage and drive results and compliance and buy in your fleet.
It's a great question, and I think one of the ways that we've been super successful is we create a fleet internal committee, and sometimes we call it a council, depending on what it is. But we create a committee, and I'm, I'm I get to be the judge and jury, and I level the playing field. Meaning, we'll have executives there. We'll have not only executives but VPs, market leaders. But I also have drivers. So we invite a certain cross section of the organization, and we set some ground rules going into that committee. Regardless of what your business title is, you get one vote, and everybody gets a vote. And just because you're a VP doesn't mean that your decision outweighs that of a driver. And it's an avenue to give the drivers a voice at that executive level, instead of it just being
And it
me
builds trust.
preaching day in and day out,
Builds trust.
right?
Yeah.
So I like to talk to the guy 6 feet closest to the work, because once you get to 7 feet, that's generally a
Love
supervisor,
that.
and they've already lost kind of they've lost a little bit of what's going on, right? So there's too much uh, perception that versus reality. So when we take drivers, and I'll use a truck specification. That's something really simple that a truck specification committee. We'll have drivers, we'll have driver managers, we have folks from the warehouse that load the trucks. We'll have executives, we'll have people from finance, and all in this committee, and we'll start talking about truck specifications. And I open it up. It's the it's like the dry erase board behind me. It's a clean slate. Let's start from zero. What do you guys? What do you need? What do you
It's
want?
excellent.
And a lot of times the drivers will, I would love to have, a toaster oven or a microwave on the truck so I don't have to stop for lunch. That's a great idea. We're not going to happen, but that's
Yeah,
a
we
great
can't have a
idea.
power inverter
You
to
know,
put in there.
yeah,
In there.
so at a certain point, some of those wants, you really have to identify what's a want
Right.
versus need. But out of those committees, from a top down approach, they really get to hear these are the challenges of the drivers trying to make a delivery to the customer. And in a lot of cases, that driver is the face and voice of their company. So if that driver is irritated at the truck that they drive, that's going to translate into that interaction with the customer. So things like grab handles, the diameter of the grab handle, where it's placed, why is it in that spot? The size of the steps on a lift gate, how
Why
you
that
ingress and
driver's
egress a
input is
body.
mission critical, right?
Exactly. So that way, when I say, hey, we're going to do a campaign and we're going to change something and it's going to cost X, there's no
Right.
pushback. At that point, the committee members are all on board. We've socialized that now with that group, and everybody understands that it's either it's a safety, regulatory compliance, a safety piece, or just kind of a driver uh, agronomic issue where we want to change something, make their life a little bit easier. So
Hot tip right there.
again, going from decentralized
Yeah,
to
get a committee together, get everybody's voices. Um, I think fleet managers, though, Thurman, think they have to kind of know everything, and they have to understand the human capital, and they have to, understand, the legal and the financial and all the things. Well, they do, but having a group together where you have voices from all those entities, especially the driver's perspective, the fleet leader can sit back and absorb all of this feedback and evaluate things based on, um, you know, is it doable? What's it going to cost? Build the ROI model with a lot of great partners in the room. And then by the time it gets to the C suite, you've developed a model by which they've come to trust you, Thurman, and your safety committee or your steering committee or whatever you want to call it. But hot tip out there for anyone listening that is the way to get things done. You know,
yeah,
that's excellent.
absolutely. We and feel free to reuse this because I don't even know where I created it, but we call it Fleet Mac. So Fleet MAC, and that's just the Fleet Management Advisory Council
Love
or
it.
committee,
Plus, it's just
depending on
catchy.
whatever we're trying to solve. Yeah, whatever we're trying to solve.
Okay, yeah, when I post
So
this
and there's
out,
a
I'm gonna
difference
say
between council
that.
and there is a difference between council and committee. Council is just kind of an advisory role, and this is kind of the wants, if you will. A committee, we're actually going to solve for X. There's going to be actions that come out of a committee structure that change something, whereas that council is more of a voice your concerns, and let's talk about painting the trucks a different color, or I don't like the road that we drive on, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it kind of steers the committee in the right way, with the right themes in mind. And um, wow, just we could talk all day. I promise you that about all the great things you're doing. Um, I'd like to wrap with a few questions, just kind of, what you've shared with our audience today is, there's some really fundamental aspects of what you're doing. There's some super intuitive type of things that you guys are doing as a seasoned fleet team. There's definitely a lot of feedback and flexibility built into the model that you described today about sort of how you manage your fleet. Also, looking to the future and really being prepared for that, and how do you do that, and what data means. So let's just stop for a second and kind of wrap today with like, what's next? What emerging, technologies? I mean, you talked a little bit about AI, but what do you see either, emerging technologies, or what do you think, are the biggest challenges that fleet managers are facing? Or just share a little bit more about your special sauce, something that we can kind of leave our listeners with, for what's next.
Yeah, I would say biggest challenge, there's never enough hours in the day. And if you build your team, right, so if you keep continuously evolving and building your fleet team, you're still going to run out of hours because you're going to be able to fill up your day, their day, and everybody else's day. And that's really kind of the draw. If you think about it, that's the draw into fleet. It's the same, it's similar, but no 2 days are ever the same. It's always a new challenge, always keeps you on your toes. But I would say that the biggest challenge is the amount of work to be done. So you really have to pace yourself. You really have to set initiatives, goals, and objectives. Go after the low-hanging fruit. Understand where the biggest value is. So I talk about it. We'll step over those shiny nickels and quarters to pick up a dirty dollar,
Love
right?
it.
So, go after the value piece. Understand and acknowledge, and I think that's part of it. You can't just put it on the back burner. Acknowledge the fact that, yes, I know we have an issue in this area, or yes, I know that we're leaving money on the table here. But what we're capitalizing on is 10x of that shiny nickel or the shiny quarter. We're going to come back and get it. And in the process of reaching over that to grab the dollars, if we can bring some of those other pieces along, great. If not, once we've tackled all these big dollars, we'll come back and get the little dollars after that. So as part of the fleet manager and kind of some of those challenges, it's being able to articulate that up the value chain and down the value chain. So even at the C-suite or at the board level, as well as with the driver, we'll have drivers that come to us and say, if we just did this, it would, we could save, 2 cents. I know, I hear you, but but not today, because today we're trying to save $4 by doing something different.
Yeah.
So, and I think once you arm people with the fact that you hear them, you understand them, and
yeah,
we're going to do that. It's just in kind of the cadence of how we get there. It's not the most pressing or the lowest hanging fruit of the day. It really builds buy-in and trust across the organization.
And engagement. It continues to drive engagement, and people feel confident that if not today, at some point, their idea or their challenge will be met by your team and the organization, and help to figure out the solves for that in the right way, with everybody included. I love it.
Yeah, I would just kind of say network, listen and learn, and ask a lot of questions, both internal and external to your organization.
Yeah.
So,
Thurman, I love talking to you. You're brilliant. One of the most brilliant fleet managers that I know, and I love what you're doing. I love that you're never resting on your laurels, and you're always thinking about next, but really grounded in what's important to people and process, which gets it done, in my opinion, the right way. I love process. It's my favorite thing. But, for the fleet community out there listening, great tidbits in here. So many that I'll clip this thing out. I'll provide some commentary so you can digest all the great things that Thurman shared with us today. Thank you, fleet community, for being here. Thank you, Thurman, for being here. Like, subscribe, comment, wherever you find your favorite content. And like we like to say on the Straight Talk on Fleet, that until next time, keep it real, keep it safe, for fleet's sake, for goodness sake. Thank you for listening. And Thurman, thanks again for being with us.
thank you so much for having me. It's been great.